on the week of the Oscar nominations being announced, I figured we'd talk about another Oscar-nominated film. So Barry is back to join and talk about Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Not a winner. I'm already angry.
I know. Best visual effects? Didn't get it?
What bested it?
I have no idea. I'll check that there. Joining, actually, The Suicide Squad as an Academy Award nominated film.
Yes, yeah. You get weird things creeping in here and there, in the lesser categories that will never make TV.
Interstellar was the one that beat it.
But that's fair enough, I guess. That's understandable. That's tough competition right there.
That is. Also nominated that year were Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Guardians of the Galaxy, and X-Men Days of Future Past. That was a good visual effects year. That's
a pretty damn good... Those are all good films. Guardians of the Galaxy has great effects. But Interstellar is... I've only watched it once, and I feel like I shouldn't watch it again because it's like...
Not a good film.
Very mixed... Well, kind of, yeah, because I kind of had mixed feelings on it, but the sheer spectacle of it all kind of wowed me, and so I came out of it kind of liking it, but I feel like if I go back and watch it again, the feelings of trepidation I had for the first half of the film would take hold for the remainder of it now that the shock value is gone, and I'd basically just say, oh, it's actually not that good.
I feel like Interstellar is one of those 6-second rule films. If you think about it longer than 6 seconds, the whole thing falls apart.
I think that's a solid Nolan rule, generally speaking.
Yes, it is. So we're talking about Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This at the time was the time, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was kind of oh, it's a fun little side thing, comedy films. But then this film came along. It's oh, this is like a real film about things.
It's kind of a powerhouse of a film in some ways, in the sense that like you mentioned, it feels like it's, first of all, it doesn't feel like it's kind of paint by the numbers. It doesn't feel kind of boilerplate in the same way the other ones do. Yeah, it's really something, and I think we can both agree easily the highlight up to this point in the MCU that we've covered thus far.
And it's realistically pretty much not even close.
Yeah, it's really quite great, and I'm looking forward to kind of diving in here.
So we'll start with, it was directed by Anthony and Joe Russo, who are known for doing television comedy.
Yeah.
And the thing I found most interesting watching this film back is I think this is the least comedic Marvel film so far. Maybe Hulk. Hulk wasn't that much of a comedy. But, there's jokes in there. But this is not a comedy in the same way, Iron Man is kind of just a comedy.
Yeah, and there's a couple of quips in there, but they're really quite small. And they are just kind of tension breaks. Yeah, it's. I mean, the thing people have kind of talked about with the Captain America franchise is how they are kind of all doing their own separate thing. I mean, the first one is a kind of a war Indiana Jones-esque caper, and this one is more of a kind of a little bit espionage-y, a little bit big budget action, a different kind of action to the typical Marvel fare. And yeah, it's pretty light on the comedy. You mentioned Hulk. I mean, I'm trying to think of other things. Pretty much everything else leans into the humor a lot more. Iron Man, Captain America 1, what else we got? Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, the Avengers films themselves, they're all pretty damn comedic. And maybe the next least comedy-focused one would probably be then Civil War. So yeah, definitely.
So it's you hire these two people who are really good at television comedy, and then they go and make a very drama-based superhero film. It's kind of neat. And
also, kind of, they with this film, I mean, they just shot themselves to the top of everyone's kind of action movie directorial wish list with this movie. That's not only a great story, well directed, but has just some of the best. I mean, watching it back, I was just like, oh yeah, I remember why this movie is so awesome. Just some absolutely fantastic action set pieces. And they have a real sense of style about them. I feel like you can, if you watch this movie, you can really tell their sense of style to their action set pieces. There's a real. It's kind of hard to describe. A real kinetic energy to their fights. A lot of movement. It's not just. It isn't two dudes in a room having a fight, but it's also not just a big CGI mess. It's really kind of somewhere in the middle. There's a lot of really clever direction. It feels like there's a lot of moving parts. There's just a lot going on, and it's really, really cool.
Because this film opens on, I actually think it's my favorite film in the whole scene in the whole MCU. The scene where it's just Cap running through a boat, just wrecking a bunch of dudes, and it's so well shot. There's like these sweeping shots of the boat as he's running around and drop kicking people over the edge. And it's just like, God, you know how to shoot an action film, and specifically for Captain America. Yeah,
there's the shot on the boat, and I believe it's replicated again somewhere later in the film. He's like, they've got like what are those isometric, for lack of a better term, isometric kind of view, kind of slanted top-down view, and they've got and all these angles of Cap like dashing from room to room. If you know what I mean. I mean, it's very, very energetic, and it's really cool. And you mentioned kind of how he's drop kicking dudes and things like that. I mean, they have this great balance of kind of comic booky physics, but like the sound effects that everything makes is perfect. One thing I love about this movie and Civil War as well is every pang of the shield as it bangs off something is just perfect. Every time Cap drop kicks someone into the side of a car, the noise is great. Every shattered glass, every explosion. And I don't know if that's necessarily their handiwork or obviously a lot of people work on these movies. But there's real care taken to the little details of the action scenes like that.
So we had most of the main cast returning. Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, Sebastian Stan were all back. Of course, Tommy Lee Jones was out because he would have been dead long ago in this film.
Yeah.
Haley Atwell was still in it, though.
Which was, I actually completely forgot she was in this second one. Yeah.
Yeah, so in the first Captain America film, you had the really strange making Chris Evans very small. And in this one, you had making Haley Atwell look very, very old.
Yeah. And I thought that looked better than the small Chris Evans,
Which they did have in this film very briefly, just to creep you out, I'd imagine.
Yeah, just a little bit. So I was getting a bit too comfortable, keep me on my toes. That scene with Atwell is pretty damn good. I feel like I feel perhaps it's just a necessity because of the nature of the time jump, but I feel like she's maybe underused in the sequels. I think obviously her funeral's in Civil War, is it?
Yep.
And it's nice that they brought that character back twice, but I would have liked a little bit more of that. One of the few, very, very, very few criticisms I kind of have of this film is that something they kind of, I don't know, tease maybe not the right word, but something they kind of allude to early in the film. That very first scene, actually, where he meets Falcon, is, hey, I'm a man who was frozen for however long, and I'm trying to deal with being in the modern world. And that's not really something they do much of at all. Just a little some little flavor for the character, just to remind you, hey, he's new to this era, blah, blah, blah. But it's never really something that they bring to the fore too much, and that's just a minor complaint, because I remember the first time I watched this film, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Is that going to be a facet of what this film is? And it unfortunately wasn't. But, she is kind of the one real tie to his past, or his original life, rather, that they bring up in any kind of important way.
The whole man out of time thing is, realistically, it almost feels like an excuse just to have that list of pop culture things.
Yeah.
Which, I'm not sure if you know this, they actually localized that by region.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so like the US had the moon landing and I Love Lucy and Steve Jobs. The UK had Sherlock, the Beatles, the World Cup final. Spain had Rafael Nadal. France had France 98 and Daft Punk. Australia and New Zealand had Steve Irwin and Skippy the Bush Kangaroo.
Oh, wow.
So that's a neat little thing to just drop into your films.
I would have gotten Skippy the Kangaroo if they put it on our list.
Apparently, I seem to remember this at the time, but they did a poll for the TV show in the UK, and Sherlock obviously won it. But there was like a campaign at the time for Father Ted to win it. It unfortunately didn't come to pass, but
that would have been an odd thing to see in a Marvel film.
Just a random Father Ted reference.
Yeah, Sherlock feels kind of safe. Although I don't know that if someone was thawed out from a block of ice, from World War II or even further back, I don't know that Sherlock is something I would mention to them that they had to immediately. But that's me being pedantic. I like Sherlock, but I don't know that it would be high on my list.
Sherlock is the single most essential piece of television of the last 70 years.
Yeah, I mean, I only started watching it like a year ago, so yeah. But it would have. I mean, look, hey, who knows how long this series of films is going to go on? So maybe they'll do something else with Cap struggling to exist in this era. Because this film in particular kind of gives me faith in that, because this is the film where they finally got a villain that had, or an apparent villain that had some depth to him, had some stuff going on here, more than just the generic evil businessman.
He was an actual character as opposed to just being, I'm a bad guy that needs to be punched in the face.
Yeah.
Because Bucky Barnes is back as the Winter Soldier.
Yeah. And even though that reveal is obviously long since revealed and known to everyone, I still feel like that all plays out very well in the film, and even though we really at this stage we have allusions to it, obviously you get the general gist of what happened to him. They don't really get into super specifics until Civil War, but
Russian brainwashing stuff happens.
Yeah, that's the top and bottom of it. They give you like one scene, but yeah, it is really great the way they give Cap someone who he's like hesitant to fight, and not in I'm a do-gooder who doesn't want to beat a guy up kind of way, but in a the sheer shock of seeing him alive, and then the puzzlement at what he's become. It's really great. And plus, I mean, I think the Winter Soldier design and look is really cool in this film. I think they did a great job with it.
I really liked actually how they recapped the plot of the first film, where they just had Cap wandering through the museum, and it's like, if you didn't see the first one, this is kind of everything you need to know. And
these Marvel films kind of exist in this weird way where you kind of have to do that, because they call them a cinematic universe and not, they're not all direct sequels. And even though this is a direct sequel to Captain America 1, we've now kind of established this culture where people like to be able to pick and choose which of these they watch, because there's 50 of them. So I appreciate that, especially since even though I came around on the first film, there isn't really a bunch of consequence that happens. It's pretty much Bucky dies, quote unquote dies, and Cap gets brought forward. That is the crux of it, really. And they establish Hydra, obviously. So yeah. One thing as well, speaking of the Winter Soldier character, I think I spoke on a previous podcast about that video doing the rounds about Marvel music and how it's kind of the one missing element of the MCU. They don't have any really memorable original compositions that stand out. I do think that this film does have one of the few good examples of a memorable kind of Marvel Cinematic Universe song. I feel like for lack of a better term, the Winter Soldier's theme, like during that big set piece in the streets, as he's kind of emerging from the smoke, being a badass, there's a certain shrill tone they play.
I was going to mention it. There's a moment where he's standing over Black Widow and he's about to kill her before somebody intervenes.
Yeah,
and they play this big shrill piece of music. It actually like it creeped me out. It's like, oh, what's happening? This isn't a Marvel score.
Yeah, it's pretty damn cool. It's a shame that it's such a decidedly villainous piece of music that they can't really apply to Winter Soldier anymore. But I watched this and I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. I wish the music was this personal in the other films, but I think maybe in general, not just Marvel, but I think in general, when there's a level of churn with these movies, like you're knocking them out, you got to hit dates, you got to get them all out in a certain order, blah blah blah. That I think music is the natural kind of sufferer there. It's tough for like really talented composers to work that way, but yeah, we've talked about that before. But that's why I wanted to make a mention of that. That was pretty cool. It's part of the really great presentation of the Winter Soldier in this film. They just introduced him as the coolest character imaginable.
And Henry Jackman did the score, by the way.
Okay, I'm not familiar with anything else he's done.
He did Big Hero 6, Civil War, and Uncharted 4, actually.
Oh, really? Uncharted 4 had pretty damn good tunes. Well, I still haven't seen Big Hero 6.
I love that film. I love that film
Yeah,
so
everyone
much.
loved it. I gotta get on that. But I'm kind of... now they've announced the Oscar noms. I kind of want to get through that list. I've
seen Moana. Kubo's very good. You should see Kubo. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's on my list as well. I really gotta see that.
And yeah, when you just have to go see like Moonlight, just tick the Oscar list.
Yeah, I was surprised it got it. I heard great things, but I was surprised it got a nomination. I rented for pretty much as soon as I finished this show. Gonna watch Hell or High Water. Sounded like my kind of film anyway, but it was kind of a surprise entry on the list there, so I'll check that out.
It's I've already seen Western, which barely exists.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those genres I wish was better because I love the idea of it, but I digress. But yeah, so trying to think what else kind of jumped out at me sort of in this film. Gary, Shandling?
Yep, Gary Shandling shows up with the least subtle Hail Hydra I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. Also, like, the least out of his comfort zone acting of all time. He's just Gary Shandling walking around in a suit.
Yep.
It's great. That's what I like. He was a great hateable politician.
He was in Iron Man 2 for your MCU continuity.
Well, see, God, it's not even that long since we watched that, and I can't remember. I feel like at the time I probably noticed it and all, but I remember him fondly in this film. But yeah, he's great. Supporting cast across the board I thought was pretty solid. I mean, you had the Shield Hydra kind of treachery, and I feel like the higher ups at Shield did feel a little bit like that typical MCU evil businessman villain, but it's fine considering you have actual Winter Soldier in there, so you can look past that. But
Robert Redford replaces Tommy Lee Jones as the old actor everybody knows who's actually really good at acting, but is slotted into the kind of I'm a bad guy.
Yeah.
And Robert Redford's fantastic in everything, but
absolutely, yeah.
There's only so much you can do.
I'm trying to think. One thing I didn't notice is, I guess it's the benefit of hindsight having seen Civil War, is that they also alluded to Hydra being responsible for the death of the Starks.
Did they do that here?
In that big info dump in the bunker.
Oh yes.
They're flashing all these newspaper clippings and B-roll of war. And there's some line about people who got in the way are disposed of by Hydra, and they very deliberately show a newspaper clipping of the Starks.
And that's how Cap knows in the next film. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's a quick little thing, but it's in there. Nice little touch.
Yeah, it just sets up the next film in a subtle but not like this is important to remember it kind of way.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't a big moment. Nothing pulled focus. It was just a little thing. Yeah, so that was a nice touch.
We had a little Danny Pudi cameo as well to keep some community tie-ins with the Russo Brothers.
Yeah.
And that'll follow into Civil War as well. There's a community tie-in there. And an Arrested Development one in Civil War. I'll point that out when we get there, but that one is fantastic.
Alright. I don't recall that now, actually, so I'm going to keep my eyes out for it.
Indeed. This film is violent. Yeah,
there's people getting wrecked in this movie, like, more than I remember. That's one thing, actually, that's jumped out at me on a repeat viewing here, is that they kill tons of people in this movie. The villains kill tons of people. The Cap and his buddies kill a bunch of people. And in some pretty gruesome ways. I mean, I completely forgot that like, Winter Soldier, like, rips a dude out of a car and throws him in front of an oncoming truck at, like, 60 miles an hour. I completely forgot about that. So that was quite the...
There's a bit toward the end as well where he just kicks a guy into a plane engine and the plane explodes.
Oh, yeah. And, like, it results in a big, gigantic explosion as opposed to just big chunks of viscera going everywhere.
Yeah.
But, they did not have that. But again, they're going for, this is supposed to be like a modern espionage thrillery action blockbuster. So you can't pull your punches on that one. So it's well, I was about to say violent. I don't know if necessarily violent is the word, because it's all relatively tame.
It's bloodless,
but it's got a body count. Certainly is what I would say.
And I do like it toward the end when the air carriers are crashing to the ground. They have the obligatory "everyone is clearing the area" scene.
Yeah, naturally. It's a staple of the MCU.
In terms of universe building, there's not much. There's a Stephen Strange name drop in there.
I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, what they're saying, oh, we'll kill all of the potential targets of Hydra, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, Bruce Banner, Stephen Strange.
Okay.
Which is interesting, because this is before, in terms of Marvel continuity, this is before he becomes Doctor Strange. So is it just that they knew beforehand? I don't know.
Maybe, although I think in Doctor Strange there's not any hints that he is anything special. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's just
he has to go out of his way to find this stuff, but who knows? You know.
And the post-credit scene sets up Age of Ultron.
I completely forgot to watch that. What is it?
It's just there's a bunch of Hydra people in a lab. It's like, ooh, look at Loki's staff. It's very powerful.
Oh, wait, no. I remember this from the first time I watched that, because I remember being bummed out. The film was great, and I was like, oh, okay. It's just another post-credit scene where they look at a thing and go, interesting.
Yeah, basically all of them, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's at least in the Civil War one, they gave you more Spider-Man, which was the big talking point of the film anyway. So yeah, you know what are you gonna do? They can't all be winners. I think I've talked before, but I'm past that concept now. You know.
Yeah. Other box checking. Stanley was the museum guard.
Yep.
Not much to it.
Said he'd be fired, I believe.
Yeah, he was very upset. They did bring back that old cap suit. I like that.
Yeah, nice touch.
And I was very disappointed, unless I missed one, which I don't think I did. There were 0 Hurricane Ranas in this film.
No, although I think there was a German suplex, was there at one point?
Yeah, Cap threw out a German suplex, and Black Widow did do a flying snapmare, so, you know, it's close enough. But yeah, no Hurricane Ranas.
Yeah, and it's a shame, because I also forgot that there's also a lot of fighting in the film. Like, there's a lot of fight scenes. I completely forgot about the elevator fight scene.
The elevator scene. How can we not talk about the elevator scene? That scene is fantastic.
That's so great. And it's such a nice contrast as well, because as I mentioned, all the other fight scenes they're on an interstate highway thing, and they're jumping from level to level, and Cap's running all the way across a boat, and he's barging through rooms, and this one's just little confined space with like 12 dudes. Wow, that's a great scene.
And I like how they foreshadowed the elevator earlier with Samuel L. Jackson's little monologue about his father.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this elevator, it's a thing. It's not, you know, you get to see the space beforehand, so when it's crammed with people, it means more.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think about the whole, like, surveillance kind of trying to be, like newsworthy or like, timely?
I don't know. I didn't necessarily think of it... Well, I mean, I guess it is somewhat timely, but my main thing from that was that they kind of established Cap as just this fittingly enough, very American hero kind of, you know, it's about freedom, not fear, I think he said. And, you know, being against the idea of increasingly making your guns and your weapons and your tech increasingly big and dangerous as a way of deterring things. You know, it was alright. I mean, I suppose it is somewhat timely, but I didn't take too much away from it. It all came off very Metal Gear Solid to me.
Did you see the most recent Bourne film?
Yes, yeah.
Like, the basic premise of that film, and they literally say this in the film, it's like Snowden, but worse.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy Winter Soldier was a little more nuanced than that in terms of trying to include, like, contemporary issues.
Yeah, that kind of bummed me out as well, especially because there was that film in general had a social media kind of slant to it. And I was just like, come on, man, that original trilogy is timeless. You could set that in any era in the last 50 years and it would basically work. I wasn't huge on that most recent one, but it was alright. You know, it was okay.
Yeah, but Cap is like a character of moral absolutes.
Yeah.
So when you shove him into morally murky situations, that's kind of like an effective formula for a good Captain America film.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of encapsulated in Bucky as well, because he's this... It's this tough choice because he's this guy who has to be stopped, but he's not really, doesn't have his wits about him, and you know, Cap obviously knows that something is wrong because he's not the person he used to be, and yeah, so he's a wholesome good guy who's not annoying about it, but is still tries to do the morally right thing and struggles with it a lot, which is very interesting.
God, this film was great.
It's a pretty damn great film.
Like this is even a film where like the third act is interesting, which is practically impossible for superhero films.
Yeah, really. It's pretty crazy to watch it back. I mean, it achieves everything it sets out to do. You kind of, it gives you more food for thought than any of the previous ones, but like at the same time also raises the bar for the action and everything. You know, it's crazy.
Because like pretty much like for every MCU film, more often than not, I'm like the drama is never effective in those films.
Rarely, yeah.
It's always just a thing that's there, and you kind of have to get through it. And there's good action, and there's like good one-liners, and that's kind of what gets you through a lot of these films. But like, no, this is like a real film.
Absolutely, yeah. It's me. I was going to say it's maybe the easiest one to show to people who don't really like superhero films, but they're all kind of easy to digest. But I think this one's being grounded in a more action espionage-like setting and tone. Means it's definitely easy to present to other people. And as we mentioned earlier, it also recaps the events of the previous film decently well. It covers all the things you gotta know.
Alright, Barry, that is the tremendous Captain America Winter Soldier. Next up is Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think that's the 1-2 punch that kind of gave the MCU its reputation as being great.
Yeah.
Because like going from Winter Soldier to Guardians of the Galaxy, which for me they're the two best films of the entire universe, assuming Guardians of the Galaxy holds up on rewatch, which fingers crossed it does. Like
I've seen Guardians a couple of times. I watched it when it came out. I watched it just barely before it left theaters again with my girlfriend. I remember because it was in an empty theater and it was also the smallest screen in the theater. And then I watched it once on Blu-ray. So I've seen that film a couple of times. And I've never disliked it. I feel like I've enjoyed it pretty much every time. So we'll dive back in there again. I definitely agree. I mean, that's kind of what got me back into it. Was I finally got around to watching Winter Soldier just before Guardians of the Galaxy. I think I was like, okay, that was awesome. And then I saw Guardians. I was like, okay, well, that was awesome. Okay, now I'm kind of back in after I was lost there with the other stuff not really grabbing me. So yeah.
Okay, before we go, plugs.
As always, twitter.com/thebaronet, or just type @thebaronet into your app. Who uses the desktop version? I don't really know. You could also find me at BarryMurphy236 on YouTube, where I'm playing through various things. It's kind of quiet on there at the moment. I'm working on a Game of the Year video, which is taking forever. I got lots to say, and then once I say it, I got to go capture game footage and chop it all together, and it's a pain. But I am very happy with the progress so far. It is looking neat. So keep your eye on there. I'm also probably going to throw up some one-offs, some little bits and pieces, just random streams, just to kind of keep something on there while I'm working on this. I did This War of Mine on PS4 recently, which is a super fun game, and that was a neat little stream. So yeah, people can check me out on those two places.